Good afternoon and welcome to Midday Live on TV3 with me, Wendy Live. The headlines for this afternoon. Former diplomat who worked closely with Kofi Annan at the UN, Patrick Hayford, says the oil for food scandal was a deliberate ploy to tarnish his image. Meanwhile, former Chief of Staff for UN Assistance Mission for Rwanda, General Henry Anyidoho blames failure of UN Security Council for Rwanda genocide. Ghana loses 7% of GDP through psychological distress. And on the foreign front, Ecuador introduces new rules to stop Venezuelan migrants entering the country without a passport. I've got details of these stories and many more lined up. Let's start with one of our headline stories. And former Deputy Force Commander and Chief of Staff for the UN Assistance Mission for Rwanda, General Henry Anyidoho, has blamed the failure of the UN Security Council to act on reports submitted by Kofi Annan for the Rwandan genocide. He rejected suggestions Kofi Annan was to be blamed for the massacre in which 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus were killed.
Former Secretary General Kofi Annan accepted institutional and personal blame for the slaughter of 800,000 civilians during the 1994 Rwanda genocide that was initially ignored by world leaders.
The international community could not muster the resources or the will to come to the aid of the Rwandese people as quickly as we would have.
Some 800,000 Tutsis and Hutu moderates were killed in about 100 days by Hutu extremists and their followers armed with machetes, garden hoes and spiked clubs. Kofi Annan, then head of United Nations peacekeeping operations, was blamed by a section of the international community for the UN's perceived lack of responsiveness to stem the tide of genocide. But retired General Henry Anyidoho, who was a deputy force commander in Rwanda, told TV3 the United Nations Security Council must be blamed.
If there was a failure, it was a failure of the UN Security Council. This could not be attributed to Mr. Kofi Annan. They have the voice to decide what should be done at a particular place at a particular time. I have always said that our mission in Rwanda was the orphan mission of Somalia because of the events in Somalia. The Western world was actually not prepared to deploy any troops to any African country at all.
A former director for Africa at the UN Secretary General's office, Patrick Hayford, corroborated General Anyidoho's assertion.
First of all, say how grateful I am that Brigadier General Anyidoho has clarified. He was not the Secretary General of the UN when the genocide in Rwanda took place. He was Under Secretary General in charge of peacekeeping. And I'm very glad that General Anyidoho has explained. The primary responsibility for that terrible tragedy was that of the Security Council.
The genocide was halted when Tutsi-led rebels overthrew the Hutu extremists, many of whom fled to neighboring Zaire, now called the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Patrick Hayford, the former director for Africa at the UN Secretary General's office during his tenure of Kofi Annan, has revealed that the oil for food scandal that rocked the tenure of Mr. Kofi Annan as UN Secretary General was a deliberate ploy to tarnish his image. He also described the late UN Secretary General as someone who initiated reforms to make the world body responsive to change. He spoke on News 360 with Abu Isamoni.
He was such a wonderful person to work for. What I mean is that he was always polite, always caring, firm but fair, an excellent leader, let me put it that way. And I recall in particular the fact that no matter what was happening in the world, he would arrive at work in the morning. Because he had worked in the UN for so long, he knew almost everybody. And from the security man at the gate right up to his office, no matter the crisis happening, he was always calm and measured in his utterances. And he would ask, by name of people's children and families, how everybody was doing.
Right.
In the midst of all the crisis. So he had that wonderful human touch.
Great. I'm sure one of the challenges in his tenure as the UN Secretary General was during the invasion of Iraq. The US overruled his advice against that. You were then with him. How did Kofi Annan feel, if you can remember?
Well, I remember very well. And as you rightly put it, he did his best as Secretary General in that crisis. And he rallied the United Nations to try and deal with the aftermath of what he could not prevent. But as you rightly said, he did his best, the best that he could to try and prevent what happened. And he spent a great deal of time and energy and effort in trying to deal with the aftermath of the invasion of Iraq and put in place a number of measures, put together an emergency team, and he tried to get the United Nations to carry out a very thorough investigation into the precise circumstances, of the tragedy. The bombing of the mission in Baghdad.
In Baghdad, yes.
And in fact, he had instituted a number of very important reforms in terms of the actual management of a UN mission in an extreme crisis as was occurring at that time.
Yeah, the invasion of Iraq.
Yes. No, but I'm talking about measures that he had taken to improve the security of UN buildings, especially in crisis situations. And he took so many other measures.
Let's move on to the implication in the oil. How did he feel about
oil for food, again, you see, there's a context. The UN Security Council did not, and I emphasize, did not approve the US invasion of Iraq. At a particular point, the Secretary General was asked to clarify, and it is clear that there were serious issues about the legality of what the United States did in invading Iraq. What happened, I was there at the time, is that at that particular period, the then President of the United States and his administration, particularly then Vice President Cheney, then Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, were incensed that the head of the United Nations at the time had the moral courage to speak out clearly about what had happened in Iraq. So a massive, well-orchestrated, well-financed effort was mounted to discredit Mr. Kofi Annan as Secretary General, to discredit Mr. Kofi Annan, the person, to discredit the entire United Nations. That, sir, is the larger context to everything that happened. Okay. And at the end of the day, as you rightly pointed out, the Volcker Commission, chaired by former chairman of the Federal Reserve of the United States, Paul Volcker, came out and it was clear that mistakes were made. But again, the responsibility for the Oil for Food program was ultimately that of the members of the Security Council.
All right.
They failed in their oversight responsibility, but in the feverish climate of the time, we have come away with this unfortunate perception that the responsibility for I would say the so-called oil for food scandal rests with this wonderful statesman. No. The ultimate responsibility, no, please, this is important. Let me clarify for the attention of the listening and the viewing public. The ultimate responsibility for the management of the Oil for Food program was that of the UN Security Council membership. The administrative management of the Oil for Food program was the responsibility of the UN Secretariat headed by Mr. Kofi Annan. But the real management of the Oil for Food program was the responsibility of the membership of the Security Council. So again, it's important to make that distinction.
I'm Wendy Lai, you're with Midday Live. Let's move on to other stories. And cocoa farmers have been advised to apply artificial pollination methods to increase the production of cocoa in Ghana. The managing director of Cocoa Board, Dr. Isaac Opoku, gave the advice when he visited cocoa farms in the region.
Dr. Isaac Opoku was accompanied by Ghana Cocoa Board officials during his 4-day tour. Dr. Isaac Opoku again said the cocoa farmers would be given fertilizer subsidy to increase their yield and pay after their harvesting period. This, he said, would boost cocoa production in Ghana, despite the fact that several farmers are now shifting to cashew cultivation in the Bunafo region. Cocoa Board intends to expand irrigation of cocoa farms started from the western region in 2017 to other parts of the country to double cocoa production by 2020.
Through the President's effort and in concert with President Ouattara of Cote d'Ivoire, we are going to roll out what we call rehabilitation of cocoa farms. And the rehabilitation involves farms that are diseased, affected by the swollen shoot virus. We are going to cut and replant. And then also moribund farms. Moribund farms include farms which are aged. We are going to cut all these cocoa trees and then replant. And we are going to start on the 23rd of August.
Dr. Isaac Opoku donated 1 box of Royal Natural Cocoa Powder and chocolates to Uzu Brempong and his workers.
The Ghana Cocoa Board has secured $230 million for the Cocoa Rehabilitation Project. Chief Executive Director of Cocoa Health and Extension, Dr. Emmanuel Opoku, said the project will help to restore about half of the country's cocoa tree stock for sustainable production. A report by Benjamin Edu.
The world's second largest producer of cocoa wants to cut down more than 500,000 hectares of cocoa trees which are non-productive because they are either diseased or overaged. According to Cocoa Board, about 20% of the country's cocoa trees have been affected by the cocoa swollen shoot disease, a virus which reduces yields. Another 25% of trees are old and unproductive. Executive Director of Cocoa Health and Extension, Dr. Emmanuel Opoku, says about 45% of total cocoa tree stock will be cut down. This will be carried out in phases over a 5 to 8 year period. Addressing a forum of Olam cocoa farmers in the eastern region, Dr. Opoku said Cocoa Board is seeking to improve yields and incomes of hundreds of thousands of smallholder farmers.
Objective is to help the farmer to be able to achieve a minimum of 1 ton from a hectare. Because currently they are doing just about 5 bags, maximum 7 bags from a hectare. But we want to double that.
Olam has over the years trained more than 30,000 farmers on good agronomic practices to produce certified cocoa beans. The institution has announced a 17 million cedi premium. 40 farmers from 40 cocoa districts in the country were awarded for their commitment to child labor issues in cocoa growing areas and also adhering to the Cocoa and Forest Initiative project. Business head of Olam Ghana, Eric Asariboche, reiterated commitment to ensure an increase in production of premium cocoa whilst working to improve the quality of life of cocoa farmers.
We have enlisted almost about 7 forest communities which we are protecting, trying to ensure that we are providing trees, seedlings to our farmers to encourage them that we can restock the tree stock which is not available to us at the moment.
Mr. Bochi highlighted Olam's cocoa and forest initiative for sustainable production.
It helps in getting access to the farmer and providing the right support for the farmer. So when we want to provide fertilizer, we want to provide chemicals, we want to provide inputs, we want to provide services. Because the farmer already, the database is there, we are able to understand what kind of input or what kind of supply we need to give to the farmer.
We're still staying in the Ashanti region, but we focus on healthcare now. And the Setra East District Health Directorate in the region has not recorded maternal deaths since June 2017. The district health director attributed this to the strict implementation of interventions such as screening for early detection of pregnancy-related diseases.
Setra East is the largest district in the Ashanti region. The last population census puts the population at 62,172. 32,661 of these are females. The district had a high number of maternal deaths, but this has changed. The district has not recorded any maternal deaths since 2017. According to statistics, in 2015, total delivery was 1,861 with only 5 deaths. 2016 recorded 2 deaths out of 2,044 deliveries. 2017 to date has seen no deaths recorded out of 1,934 deliveries.
When they come in during registration and they have low level of iron, when during the time that they are going to deliver, and we measure we also look at their iron level, it becomes high because of the education that we give to them during pregnancy and the food demonstration that is being carried out in the communities.
District health authorities say collaboration with World Vision and NGO is achieving success.
World Vision is helping us, helping that mother during pregnancy, and when the child also comes up, they take care of the child and the mother. In terms of vitamin A, they are providing for that for that woman who had delivered. We call it postpartum vitamin A. And then in terms of the child, we take care of the child in terms of growth monitoring. And then we monitor the growth until the child is 5 years.
World Vision Ghana has also set up the mother-to-mother support groups in communities. Members of the group have been empowered to help educate other mothers on what to do when pregnant. The technical program manager, health, nutrition and HIV/AIDS at World Vision Ghana, Micah Ayo Olad, explained the mother-to-mother support groups help in reaching more mothers.
As a national program, what we are doing now is about introducing what we call father support group system, whereby the man is well involved in issues of maternal and child health, because some of the challenges we are getting now is that the women are willing, but the men sometimes can discourage or take decisions that don't go to the hospital.
World Vision is also improving infrastructure. It put up the only functional community health planning services CHIPS compound at Ashirowa, which has a population of 1,720. The facility caters for emergencies within the communities, and it is expected to improve healthcare delivery.
Let's focus on Greater Accra, and residents of Agbebloshie have appealed to the Accra Metropolitan Assembly to rescind its decision to embark on a demolition exercise in the area. The intended exercise would render close to 3,000 people homeless.
The demolition exercise, if executed, will affect over 1,500 structures stretching from the railway area behind the Accra Brewery Limited to the Agbebloshie station. According to the aggrieved residents, officials of the Accra Metropolitan Assembly reportedly visited the area last week to demarcate structures to be demolished. Residents claim Accra Metropolitan Assembly wants to relocate tomato sellers who sell in very deplorable conditions away from the main Abobloshi market area. A spokesperson for the residents appealed to the Accra Metropolitan Assembly to rescind its decision to demolish structures in the area since they acquired the land legitimately from the traditional authorities.
We are demanding answers from government because we are not squatters. The land belongs to us.
They called on government to immediately intervene to stop the impending demolition exercise.
To other stories, and food, nutrition and dietetics professionals have stressed on the need for governments to urgently intervene in the food and nutrition security situation of the country to promote national development. At a food and safety conference organized in Accra, stakeholders called on government to give matters pertaining to food and nutrition security the utmost national attention.
Over the past decade, Ghana has made some significant progression in nutrition by reducing poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. The country, however, continues to experience a myriad of nutrition challenges, including undernutrition, micronutrition deficiencies, and overnutrition, which impact negatively on the health status of citizens. Women and children constitute this key vulnerable group of the society. Malnutrition undermines the economic potential of the country as well as human productivity. In 2012, for instance, an estimated 4.6 billion cedis, equivalent to 6.4% GDP, was lost as a result of child nutrition in Ghana. In the same year, 41% of adults surveyed were found to be stunted in their childhood years and were estimated to incur 319 million annual loss in potential income due to lowered productivity. At the Food and Nutrition Conference, participants from countries across the world focused on the mobilization of critical mass of highly motivated food and nutrition.
As we are trying to form the Food, Nutrition and Dietetics Academy, we are aiming that every school, which we are going to work with Ghana Education Service and the government, to assign a nutritionist or a dietitian to every school.
Participants underscored the relevance of food and nutrition security, which they insisted must be given national attention.
Many of the people who are giving information about food and nutrition and dietetics don't have any background. So my advice to the public is that seek out for those who have those qualifications. We are making efforts to make ourselves available.
We have realized over the years that there's no way a single sector will be able to deliver on confronting malnutrition in all its forms. We need effort of all stakeholders, all disciplines, all platforms on deck to be able to address this big problem of malnutrition.
Now to one of our headline stories, and the chairperson of the Ghana Psychological Council, Professor Angela Oforiatta, says Ghana loses 7% of GDP through psychological distress. Addressing the 4th scientific conference held at UPSA here in Accra, the professor said this is so because the nation is not taking mental well-being seriously as it should.
The theme for the conference was thought, behavior and action, making the Sustainable Development Goal count in national development. The chairperson of the Ghana Psychological Council, Professor Angela Oforiatta, stressed that Ghana can do more to address the negative impact of mental strain on national development.
We know that chronic diseases are impacted by psychological health. So you are more likely to get a stroke, or make your diabetes worse, or your sickle cell anemia recurrence of crises more frequent if your stress levels are high. It's about making sure that our environments don't give us stress.
Speaking on the recent collapse and subsequent merger of some banks by the Bank of Ghana, The secretary of the Ghana Psychological Association, Dr. Collins Bedwajiman, explained the psychological dimension of the issue.
The Bank of Ghana has not done much when it comes to supporting the psychosocial well-being of people around the collapse. And this is a worry. If we do set up committees to investigate these banks, before we announce, do we create change readiness? Do we put in place a psychosocial support framework to support these people in the short term, in the long term?
The two-day conference seeks to bring together psychological therapists and other mental health stakeholders to deliberate on mechanisms that can be adopted to address mental health and how it can help in achieving the SDGs.
More than 60% of people with TB in Ghana are left undiagnosed or underreported. Ghana's first national TB patient cost survey indicates the proportion of TB patients living in poverty before TB diagnosis is greater than in general Ghana's population. But while TB patients battle with the disease, they also place economic burden on households, worsening existing levels of income.
It sent me out of the house. I left the house and I became a skeleton walking on the streets. Even sometimes there is no food. I have to go begging people before I'll get something to eat.
Alhassan Musa's story reflects what persons cured from TB go through. TB patients incur huge costs from medical and transport costs associated with seeking and receiving health care. Such costs in turn affects health outcome and increase the risk of transmitting the disease and making them impoverished. TB is one of the main causes of deaths related to antimicrobial resistance and the leading killer of persons with HIV. Launching a policy dialogue on Ghana's first national TB patient cost survey, the Deputy Director General of the Ghana Health Service, Dr. Gloria Kwansasare, noted findings will be used to implement strategies to end TB by 2030. World Health Organization representative Dr. Owen Kalua indicated majority of TB patients face catastrophic costs and requested the needed support for TB. MP for Dafia Mabuse Isa Dr. Sebastian Sandare said the lawmakers will put in the needed support to cut down the cost on TB patients.
The timelines will have to do with the budget, because whatever we do would have to fit in with the annual budget, and that is when we will be serious when we are debating the budget or going through the budget. We ensure that health as a whole gets its fair share of the national budget.
More than 10 million people fell ill with tuberculosis, of which 1.7 million people lost their lives globally in 2017.
You're still watching Midday Live. Do stay. Thanks, Christine. Let's look at education now. In the acting Vice-Chancellor of the University of Education, Winneba, Reverend Father Professor Anthony Afo-Bruni has called on stakeholders in education to support the double-track system for the free SHS policy to minimize implementation hitches. He believes the policy has great potential in providing a strong cornerstone for development.
The acting Vice-Chancellor of the University of Education, Winneba, commended government for taking what he calls the boldest decision in the country's educational sector with the introduction of the free SHS policy and its accompanying double-track system. Speaking at an interaction with traditional leaders and the people of Efutu in the central region, he indicated the university has commissioned the research to track the SHS preparation and admission intake over the next 5 years.
We always want to count the cost of education and set aside such needed and useful policies as are being rolled out by the government. We will end up cultivating and harvesting ignorant and poor citizens. No community can lift its indigents from ignorance, powerlessness, and poverty by sidestepping access to high school and tertiary education. No, we need to engage in vigorous campaign to increase Efutu kid enrollment in senior high school. We need to do that.
Reverend Father Professor Afo Broni said the University of Education is committed to the course of the free SHS policy and announced plans by the university to absorb the first batch of the free SHS policy. He posits the university prepares the grounds to expand their intake in 2020 to help absorb many of the free SHS graduates.
In light of the above, we in this university are building extensively and are expanding extensively our infrastructure. Designs have been completed and contracts are about to be awarded for the construction of 8 pavilions, each with 550 seat capacity. All of this is in anticipation of the arrival of the first batch of the free senior high school students.
The paramount chief of the Efutu traditional area, Nenyi Gate VII, thanked the university for their thoughts and programs arranged to serve the people of Efutu, describing it as a remarkable one and one of the best things that has ever happened to the people of Efutu in recent times. He also called for a healthy partnership and peaceful coexistence between the university and the people of Efutu. MP for Efutu, Alexander Kwamena Apoyomakin, expressed his delight at the healthy collaboration evolving between the university and the people of Efutu.
A memorandum of understanding has been signed between the University of Education Winneba and the chiefs of Winneba in the Central Region. This comes following numerous efforts by the Member of Parliament for the Efutu constituency, Alexander Fenyomakin, and the chiefs of Winneba to let the University of Education Winneba live up to its social corporate responsibility to the Winneba community. Here's a report by Lucy Ayambela.
The ceremony, which took place at the university's council chamber, was witnessed by the university authorities, the Efutu Municipal Assembly, the Efutu Traditional Council leaders, and the Zongo community leaders. Chief of Winneba, Nenyi Gate, who addressed the meeting, said there has always been some coexistence between the University of Education Winneba and the Winneba community. Member of Parliament for Efutu, Alexander Fenyomakin, stressed that government would do everything possible to ensure the well-being of the university. Hence, the university must also ensure what is due the Winneba community is given them.
And symbolic undertaking to commit to this MOU. To me, if my tenure ends tomorrow, I will thank my God and appreciate prosperity that I've achieved.
The acting Vice-Chancellor, Reverend Professor Anthony Afo Broni, said the university is stepping up its corporate social responsibility that will ensure the people of Winneba benefits.
The university also commits to providing the necessary community support as part of its corporate social responsibility from time to time. The university further commits to promoting local content in its various activities, including job opportunities and general business activities. The municipality, on the other hand, commits to doing everything possible as a policymaker in projecting the good image of the university.
He said the institution is in the process of getting street lights for some areas within Winneba. Reverend Professor Anthony Afo Broni stressed that the university will also provide educational support for the people of Ejumakon, Kumase and Santimampong, where the university has satellite campuses.
To other stories, and the Executive Director of the Ghana Standards Authority, Professor Alex Dodo, has declared zero tolerance for non-compliance to standards. He said his outfit is taking it tough on institutions, manufacturers and individuals whose products or services do not meet safety standards.
The influx of substandard and uncertified products on the Ghanaian market has become a serious concern to many. Of more concern is the number of substandard electrical cables that have flooded markets across the country. This has been the cause of several fire outbreaks. However, Executive Director of the Ghana Standards Authority, Professor Alex Dodu, says the authority is addressing the menace.
What has happened is that the Standards Authority has declared a zero tolerance for any substandard product on the market. Our teams, as I speak to you, have been on the market. They're on the market and they'll be there for the next 6 months. We are trying to sanitize the market. The findings are scary. We have been on the market since last week, Monday. Most, if not all, the electrical cables we have seized from the Okanshi area, Opera area, sadly, have failed every test. And as we speak, we are working with the security agencies to go and just retrieve all of them for destruction.
The authority, he says, has scaled up the drive to check the influx of poor quality products into the country. Another cause for concern, according to Professor Dodu, are the numerous buildings that have lifts that do not conform to standard requirements. The authority, he said, is the custodian of weights and measures and inspectors of weighing and measuring devices under the Weights and Measures Decree 1975.
In Ghana, as we stand today, it's very difficult to have exact numbers, but Greater Accra alone, maybe 5,000, maybe 6,000 elevators, individual ones, maybe more. So nationwide, let's have a rule of maybe 10,000. In our books at the Ghana Standards Authority, only one, only one has been pattern approved. As we speak, one other agency has brought their elevators for pattern approval.
Professor Alex Dodu says his outfit will do everything to protect the public.
It's been quite challenging in the sense that we have a lot of things which pose dangers to health and safety. Over the years, collectively, we have ignored them. I know I've just mentioned lifts, but what about all those lifting equipment, the cranes? We have been to the ports. There's no way you'll be using cranes unless they are checked. And there are accidents on a daily basis. So what the Ghana Standards Authority Board has said is that this is our responsibility. Yes, we haven't done it over the years, but we cannot tell Ghanaians that we don't know about it. And so, yes, we've held our hands up and said that we have not done what we have to do, but we are doing it now.
The Dean of Accredited Studies of Akrofi Christella Institute of Theology, Mission and Culture, Reverend Professor Philip Lai, has urged Christians to review some of their teachings that condemn certain Ghanaian cultural practices. He maintained good Ghanaian cultural practices that promote development must be adopted in the Christian values.
In recent times, there have been some indications which suggest an attempt to relegate the tradition to the background in the face of recent Christian expansion within the Ga community. Speaking at the lecture on a topic, the significance of Madumo for Christian faith in Accra, the Dean of Accredited Studies of Akrofi Christella Institute of Theology, Mission and Culture, Reverend Professor Philip Lai, expressed worry Ghanaian Christians are losing the values and traditions of their culture. He stressed the need for Christians to revisit some of the traditions and values that mark them as Ghanaians.
It isn't all that is in our past that is rotten and that should be thrown away. We need to salvage as much as we can from our past. Hitherto, the church has frowned upon so many things, our traditions, our ceremonies, our festivals. But there is need to revisit the past.
The Dean for Mission and Culture stressed the need to bring back the teachings of Ghanaian culture and traditions in various churches. He regretted most churches have shunned the values of Ghanaian heritage.
We need a more concerted effort. We need a lot of education because people are looking for direction. Just how to go about it. They are very clear in their minds that, well, there's nothing wrong about these things, but how to incorporate them and how to work on them is the problem.
We have sports shortly. Do stay. Some good news here. Ghana Actors Guild has amended its constitution, reserving the position of the first vice president for women. Aside empowering women, the move is to position the guild as a gender-sensitive body. Owusurai reports the guild's emergency congress constituted a 5-member committee to plan an election before the close of October.
Do you accept that we promulgate it and have it as our constitution of the Ghana Actors Guild? If you are in favor, say aye.
By popular acclamation, the Girls' Emergency Congress approved the amended constitution.
I will officially declare your constitution duly promulgated.
The new constitution, among other things, stipulates that only women can contest the position of the first vice president. The move is to empower and actively involve women in the running of the guild.
How we put the structure of the guild forward to be seen as a gender-sensitive group. And for the women who remain quiet, it is for you to today stand up for your rights. Stand up for your rights.
The guild will elect a new president and add executives at this next Congress scheduled for October 2018. A 5-member electoral committee including Frank Idam, Johnny Akpakli and Reverend Dante Mensah was constituted to come up with a clear roadmap for its next elections. Members vowed to put in place credible and transparent process for the next election.
Again, there should be time for vetting, and they must draw the comprehensive timetable for election materials and all. So we're going to put all these things together to get a credible, transparent and successful elections.
It's a responsibility which we must execute in the interest of the guild. So I don't see it as a challenge at all. We are trying our very best so that we can put the guild on a round footing, transparency, probity and accountability.
Members shared the expectations of the committee.
I expect them to be balanced, so they shouldn't be biased. They should just allow anybody who wants to come in. But when the right time comes, we shall know who are really worth for it.
And on that note, we end Midday Live. I am Wendy Lai. Enjoy the rest of our programs. And remember, News 360 is at 7. Thanks for watching.